All right. All right. We are recording. Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to Red Morton Park in beautiful Redwood City, California for the second installment of the day of Navigating the Modern World with Coach Eli. And this is the daily walk edition of the Navigating the Modern World with Coach Eli because, as I mentioned earlier today, in the previous video I did, I'm going to be starting a weekly live show starting next Wednesday. That is going to be the official Navigating the Modern World with Coach Eli show, where I'm going to be interviewing and speaking with many different guests that are going to be sharing their experiences and their opinions about how the modern world is is treating them nowadays. But anyway, I can't believe how amazing the weather still is. I believe it's November 5th today, Tuesday, November 5th, election day. Election day. I'm not even going to talk about that. I'm not really too happy with the way our country is going right now, so not even going to go anywhere near that subject. But yeah, the weather is incredibly amazing. It's like 76 degrees. In my car, it shows the outside temperature, and as I pulled into the park, it said 76 degrees on November 5th. Wow. Feels like summertime still, and it should be like winter, right? Anyway, let's just get right to it because this is probably going to be a pretty long video here today, and I've got a long day planned tomorrow. I need to get some rest tonight and do my first walk early in the morning tomorrow, probably at 6:30 a.m. or 7 a.m. because at 9 a.m. AT&T is coming to install fiber, like I've been mentioning. I'm going to be getting a gigabit up and a gigabit down for $80 a month. Unbelievable. I'm still so fired up about that. But anyway, let's get to the topic here and we'll get right to it. Okay, the topic of this second installment of the Daily Walk or Navigating the Modern World with Coach Eli, Daily Walk Edition. The second topic of the day is your primary caregivers, which are your parents or your legal guardians, set the tone for your future behavior as an adult. And then we're also going to talk about, what's up with people's attitudes today in the service industry and beyond. One more time. Topic of this installment of Navigating the Modern World with Coach Eli, Daily Walk Edition, is your primary caregivers, which are either your parents or your legal guardians in some cases if you are adopted. Okay. Set the tone for your future behavior as an adult. And then after that, we're going to be discussing, why people's attitudes nowadays are, what's up with people's attitudes nowadays? Why are their attitudes so shitty in the service industry and beyond? And I have a lot of experience regarding shitty service in the service industry over the past couple of years. And it kind of even affected my relationship because I used to kind of react to it, and maybe I shouldn't have, but I'll be honest, it just sucks that people have a shitty attitude nowadays, and people's work ethic has gone down the toilet. Even servers out there that are dependent on tips to survive because they're making minimum wage, they give you shit service, and then they get pissed off that you don't give them a tip, or you give them a 10% tip instead of a 20 or 25% tip. I'll get into that in just a little bit. Trust me. I've got a lot to say about that. But anyway, let's talk about, how your primary caregivers affect your future behavior as an adult. I've been learning a lot about this lately. And I'm going to go out as far and say that this is the absolute biggest reason why my last relationship failed. Let me repeat that one more time. This is the absolute biggest reason why my last relationship failed, was because of my behavior. Now, my behavior, I'm not a bad guy. I care about people, but sometimes I overreact to certain things. And sometimes it's been hard for me, to control my emotions in certain situations. I've never been violent. I've never hurt anybody. I never would hurt a fly. But when you're in a relationship, one of the most important aspects, if you're a man especially, is emotional self-control. And if you continue to let, what are considered small things bother you emotionally as a man over time and you overreact, eventually, the woman you're with is going to get tired of it, and then she's going to end up leaving you because she's going to see it as a behavioral pattern and a behavioral issue, and she doesn't want to be around that. She needs you to be the rock because she's going to have moments like that. And, if she can't trust the fact that you can't contain your own shit, how's she going to trust the fact that you're going to be able to help her and be there for her to console her when she's going through her emotional shit, right? Makes sense? Yeah, it does. So, let me just share a little bit more about my story. I've shared about it in the past. I've talked about it in the past, which is what I'm trying to say. But I've been learning more and more about my relationship with my primary caregivers, which are my mother and father. My father passed away 10 years ago. God rest his soul. Great man. And my mother's still around. Great woman. But I've been learning more and more that even though my parents, gave myself and my brother the best life possible, we always had food to eat. We always went to the best private schools. We always had a roof over our head. We always had a running car to get from point A to point B. On paper, we looked great. Okay. But when it came to, the things that we did as a family, I'm looking back and I'm beginning to realize that, my family, when we were hanging around each other, we really never had a lot of fun. Very rarely. We were always in serious situations when we would go over to my grandparents' place, which were my father's parents, because my mother's side was in Greece. Here, in the Bay Area, when my grandparents were around, they lived here. My aunt, who's my father's sister, lives here still. She's still alive. And, my mom, my dad, my brother, and I, we lived here as well. So basically, my father's side of the family was here in the San Francisco Bay Area in the U.S., and my mother's side of the family was in Greece. And, when we would go, let's say, for example, to my grandfather's place or my aunt's place, or the family would come to, my parents' place for a holiday dinner such as Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, New Year's, etc. It was supposed to be a bunch of fun, but it never was really fun looking back at it. It was always, it always involved a serious conversation, such as, what are you going to do with your life? Are you going to get married and have kids? Are you going to give us grandchildren? It was always about, my family projecting what they wanted, myself, my brother, and my aunt's daughter, which is my cousin, what they wanted us to become. It was always a serious natured conversation. And looking back at it, it was never really fun. And my family was great. They were very supportive. They were there for us. They took care of us. Like I said, we had nice homes to live in. We went to the best private schools. We always had a car or many cars to get around from point A to point B. We played Little League Baseball. We played AYSO soccer. We did all those things. But it was always a serious environment. Looking back at it, I'm like, wow, there's nothing fun about this. And families are supposed to have fun, right? And I look at how that affected my behavior, especially in my last relationship. And if I go to previous relationships before that, I look at how my behavior affected the relationship, and now I realize where it stemmed from. I was never really in a relaxed environment growing up with my family. It was always an in-your-face, type of environment in a loving way. It was, my family got in my face, in my brother's face, and in my cousin's face, you know, um, in a loving way, but it was a very dominant and in-your-face type of way where, like, they were just telling us what we should do and how we should turn out and the career we should choose to do, and we should marry a Greek girl. And they used to even say that you don't want to marry an American girl, and you know, they're gonna take advantage of you and this and that, right? My dad would say that in his tone of voice. My grandpa would say the same thing, and it was funny. I dated a Greek girl in my younger days, and let me tell you, she was no different than the American women. Women are women. It doesn't matter what ethnicity they are. They're women. Men are men. It doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. My family didn't get that. They came from the old school. They came from the old country. So that's the type of upbringing I had. I had a very old school, old country type of upbringing where it was very firm and there wasn't a lot of fun involved. And, my family, my father, my mother, my brother, and I, we went on a few vacations, but not that many. We probably went on a total of maybe 4 or 5 vacations, in my youth. By the time I was 18, we had only gone on 4 or 5 vacations. I think we went to Tahoe a few times, went to Donner Lake, and a couple other places. Whereas most other families will take 1 or 2 vacations a year. It's family time. They'll go camping, they'll go bike riding, they'll go hiking, they'll go do all these things. And my family never did all those things, but I enjoyed those things. I always enjoyed all those things, but my family never wanted to do them. And looking back, and I was talking about this with my mother the other day because I spent a lot of time with my mother. I've been spending a lot of time with my mother lately since my breakup almost 3 months ago, and I've been really trying to, you know, um, work on our relationship. We've become a lot closer than we ever have been before. But like I mentioned before, my mother has anxiety, and it's hard to deal with it. And I can only tolerate so much, but I do the best I can because I love her. But that's another thing. I've been in an anxious environment within my family, and that also has affected my behavior as an adult. But another thing I have not mentioned out here publicly, and I will right now, because it'll make sense, is when I was growing up until I was about the age of 15 or so, my mother wasn't working. She was raising my brother and I, and my dad was working 7 days a week, 14 to 16 hours a day. And then on Sundays, he would go to church, and I'd go to church with my father. And then after that, he would go to work and work till like midnight and then come home. And I hardly got to spend time with my father. Growing up, all my father did was work. And, obviously somebody had to provide because, even back in those days, the 70s and 80s, when my family first came out here to the San Francisco Bay Area, okay, it was much cheaper to buy a house back then and to live out here back then, but it was still one of the more expensive places to live because it's all relative. Back then, when it was $26,000 to buy a house out here, back east it was probably $5,000. So it's all relative to the time. So my father was working hard to provide for the family, which was great in one aspect, but on another aspect, he was hardly there. And he wanted to be there. Don't get me wrong. He did take some holidays off, and he was there as much as possible. My father loved me to death, and my brother to death, and my mother to death. He loved everybody. But he would work all these long hours to make as much money as possible to provide for the family. Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that will affect, a child's behavior in the future when their father, you know, is not around as much? Not because he didn't want to be there. I'm not taking anything away from my dad. I love my dad. God rest his soul. He was a great provider. I love the man to death, and it makes me teary-eyed. You can't see it because my sunglasses are on, to say this about him. But I'm speaking of the truth because I'm 44 years old now as an adult, and all of this has tremendously affected me emotionally, and it's affected my behavior. And I don't want it to affect my behavior. I don't want what happened in the past to affect me now. And you see, I'm kind of torn because my family's intentions were to raise my brother and I in the best ways possible. And I firmly believe that. I firmly believe that what my mother and father did, were to try to give my brother and I the best shot at life. I believe they honestly were trying to do that. But what they didn't realize is that by not being there, my mother was there, and I'll get to that in a second. But by my father not being there most of the time, that did affect me. It did affect me. I hate to admit it, but it did affect me. I've got the guy on a bike here who's selling like snow cones and churros and things. Oh my gosh, man. Give me a second here. This is just funny. I'm taking a breather here for a second. Watching this guy on the bike who's selling his products. It's like Hispanic products, Mexican products. They're good shit, but they're highly caloric, lots of carbs, not good for my diet. So I won't be buying any of that shit, at least not for a while. Maybe a special treat one of these days. But anyway, so yeah, my father was not around as much, not because he didn't want to be. He didn't abandon me. He was providing for the family. He was doing what he had to do, and I respect that. But it did affect me, and it has affected me to this day. Okay. Now, let's get to my mother. Okay. My mother was always there for us, my brother and I. But like I mentioned before, what happened to my mother? My mother, was 22 or 23 when she married my father, and my father was like 39 or 40. There was an 18-year difference. And my mother left her family in Greece to move here to the U.S. with my father and his family. So what happened to my mother? My mother left her family. And from what I've learned about anxiety lately, I figured in my head, I've tried talking about this with my mother, but good luck. She flips out when I talk about it because she thinks that when I talk about my mother thinks that I feel that, my parents didn't raise me right. And I tell them, no, I'm just saying this is why I ended up being the way I've ended up being. I'm trying to correct all these behavior issues I've had because of this. And in order to do that, I have to figure out where the root of the problem came from, where the problem stemmed from. I have to dig deep, right? And if I share my story, I can help other people figure out the same thing that they may be going through. So I highly assume, I'm probably right, that my mother was having separation anxiety from her family. She basically left her family in Greece at a young age, in her early 20s, to move to a foreign place in the U.S. with my father while newly married, and then coming here and having kids and being with my father's family. Could you only imagine what my mother was going through inside? And why did she do it? She didn't have to do it. Why did she do it? You know? I look back and I'm happy she did it, because if she didn't marry my dad and then get together and do the nasty, I mean, I don't want to say that about my parents. I'm trying to lighten this thing up a little bit. If they didn't, get married, I would have never been born. Then you wouldn't be seeing Coach Eli here. Coach Eli's one unique fucked up guy, but you know what? I'm fucked up in a good way. We can be fucked up together. There's nobody out there like me, folks. I'm just saying. I'm not saying I'm all that, but there's no one that's going to come out here and be as raw and real as myself. And hopefully you all learned something from this. 'Cause my life's been quite interesting, more interesting than you'd ever know, or maybe anyone else you know. So yeah, my mother probably had separation anxiety. So what happened? I was born, and because my dad was working all day, and initially we were living with my dad's parents in the same house, and I'm sure that, they were driving my mother crazy. What happened to my mother? She latched onto me. She grabbed me by the hand so tight, never let me go. I was like an emotional crutch to my mother. She won't admit it. I've tried talking with her about it. But whenever I do, obviously she's gonna react to it, because she's gonna think that, she was taking advantage of me to cure her separation anxiety from leaving her family in Greece and coming out here to a foreign place. But that's the truth. But she can sit there and get upset all she wants, and I still love my mother. I'm not talking shit about my mother, but look at how it's affected me. My mother grabbed me so tight, she would always hold on to me. I was like her security blanket, right? Everywhere we would go, my mother was always there. Never let me go. So what happened when I started making friends and my friends weren't always available? The moment my friends said no, it pissed me off, because I was used to my mother always being there for me and clinging on to me so tightly. I learned a behavior from my mother that, you know, the best friends to have are people that are going to be there for you 24/7. And that's not the case. That's what happened because of the situation I just mentioned. My mother left her family in Greece. My father was working all day. He wasn't around. Now, don't get me wrong. They provided a great lifestyle for my brother and I, but look at how it affected me emotionally. Look at how it affected my behavior. And I'm actually a really nice, decent guy. I love people. I've always been a good person. Somebody's coming over here. I want to see what direction they're going so I don't run into them. So I'm going to just wait here a second. Okay, she's going that way. So I'm going to cross the street over here. I'm sorry, I'm feeling a little bit of a rage when I talk about this, but it has affected me. It's affected my relationships with women. It's affected my friendships. It's affected jobs I used to have in the corporate world. The behaviors that I learned as a little kid have completely affected me. And again, I'm not blaming my family for any of this, my mom or my dad, because they didn't even know that it was happening. They thought in their head and heart that they were doing the right thing. By my dad busting his ass going to work and providing, working all day, every day, and my mom always holding us tight by the hand, never letting us go. And it seemed to be working back then. But as I got older, and I had issues in grammar school and in high school, I had issues getting along with people. People loved me, but I had issues getting along with people because they would hang out with me, but the moment that they couldn't hang out with me, I would react to it and say, "Hey, dude, why aren't you available? Dude, how come you're never around?" This and that, right? Which is abnormal behavior. People don't have every minute to spend with you. They don't have every fucking minute to spend with you. They have other things to do. So they're going to hang out with you when they can. But for me, I wanted them around 24/7. You know why? Because my mom used to hold me by the hand 24/7. I learned that behavior from her. Again, because of the fact that she left her family in Greece to come out here to have a life with my father and his family. And so I became my mother's emotional crutch. Now, I know there are some people out here that know my mother, know myself. I'm connected with a lot of people on Facebook. And I really want all of you to know that I'm not mad at my mother, I'm not mad at my father, and I don't want you to be mad at them, and I don't want you to think there's anything wrong. The only thing I want out of this is to teach other people, for other people to identify any similar issues and correct them. Because you know what? I've identified these situations, and now I can correct these behaviors and have a normal, healthy life, because that's all I've ever wanted. And again, I'm not saying that my family did not want to give me a normal, healthy life. I'm not saying that my parents' intentions were not to raise me up as best as possible. I firmly believe it was. They just didn't know any better. They did what they thought was right. But because of the situation, look what happened. So I'm only sharing this because I want other people out there that have been struggling in their life with behavioral issues like I've had, unintentional behavioral issues like I've had, to identify these issues and then to correct them and have a better life. And then let me tell you this, in my last relationship, the reason why it's been very hard to get over it is not just because my ex I felt was a really good woman. My ex's family was an amazing family that I wish my family was exactly like. My ex's family was exactly as I wished my family would have been. So when I was in my last relationship, not only did I feel my ex was an amazing woman, her family that came along with it, I felt was like my own family. I felt was like a family that I never had. Now, I'm not criticizing my family for that. I love my family. I'm grateful for what they've done for me. But the emotional support that I got from my family unintentionally was shitty. I never had the right emotional support from my family growing up. I had an unhealthy level of emotional support. And they weren't trying to intentionally do that, but they didn't even realize it. They were just trying to do what they thought was the best that they could do to raise my brother and I. Okay? And that's why I keep mentioning my last relationship, because I learned a lot from it. Because when I was around my ex and her family, I felt at peace. I felt calm, relaxed. I felt happy. I felt like I was on top of the world, because that's all I've ever wanted. That's all I've ever wanted. And now, because of my behaviors that stem back to everything I've talked about here today, which is primarily the main reason why my ex broke up with me, it has at least allowed me to realize where the issue stemmed from so I can correct it, which I have, and have a better shot at life and have a better shot at making my next relationship work. So before I get to the second part of this video here with the topic, I just want to let you all know out there that if you are struggling from emotional issues, or if you are a good person but can't seem to make your relationships work, or you can't seem to get along with people, or you get along with people but your friendships or relationships fail after a while and you can't keep them long lasting or forever, dig deep back to your upbringing. And if your parents are still around, or other family members are still around that know your parents, talk to them about it. Ask them how things really were back then. Okay? Put yourself back in those days with what you've learned now as an adult, and try to identify, what's caused you to behave this way. I've done a lot of soul searching lately, and I'll tell you, the things I've been figuring out about my upbringing and my family and my behavior and my emotions and all of that just blow me the fuck away. And it's making me a better and stronger person. And before I move on to the next topic, I just want to say I am grateful to every single person out there that has allowed me to find this out, even at this point in my life, because I now have the second half of my life to enjoy it in a normal way. I even go back as far and thank my ex, thank her family, and I'll thank my family as well too, because I've been talking with them lately. I thank my friends that have been there for me. I thank everybody that I've talked to about this that has allowed me to figure this issue out within myself and to correct it. Because in most cases, or in every case, for children to come out healthy, it depends on the upbringing of their parents. Okay? Depends on their relationship with their parents and how things were when they were growing up, especially during the first 3 years. From the moment that you're born as a little baby until about 3 years old, those first 3 years of behavioral patterns that you learn stick with you for the rest of your life. Let me tell you. Okay? So if you're out there and you're planning on having children, you're recently married or you have one on the way, just know the first 3 years of that baby is going to be dependent on you coaching them and teaching them the right ways. I'm not an expert on that. I know people that are, and if you need a referral to some people that I know are great, parental behavioral experts, let me know and I'll connect you with them. But those first 3 years are crucial. Okay? Those first 3 years are absolutely crucial. Okay? Give your child the best shot at life. Okay? And even though you may think that you're going to be the best parent, if you are about to become a parent for the very first time, even if you think you know exactly what to do, think again, reach out for help before it's too late, because what you do those first 3 years are going to affect your child for the rest of their life. And I'm sure you want to give your children the best shot at life and hopefully prevent them from going through a lot of the things that I've been through. Now, don't get me wrong, I've had a great life and I've enjoyed my life, but I've had a lot of emotional turmoil in my life that's affected my life. Okay? I don't want anyone else to go through that. Okay? Doesn't mean I'm fucked up. Doesn't mean that I'm not a good person. I'm just being honest with you, what I've been through. And for me to even have the emotional strength and stability to come out here and share this with you folks, hopefully that says something about my strength. I may sound weak right now, but I don't feel I'm being weak. I feel I'm being strong. Because somebody needs to talk about this shit. Someone needs to share this shit. Someone needs to be raw and real about it, because nobody out there is. And that's part of my coaching right here, is that I want to show you how I'm feeling and what I've been through. And I want you to feel my pain. And I also want you to feel my pleasure too. I want you to see my ups and downs. And that doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make me a weak person. It makes me a normal, healthy person that's been trying to find his way, regardless of how, things were for me in the past and my upbringing. So I'm going to leave it at that for that subject there. Okay? Now, let's talk about, you know, um, people's attitudes nowadays in the service industry and beyond. And I thought of this subject because, in my last relationship and even in the past relationships, before that, whenever I would go to a restaurant, not every time, but many times when I would go to a restaurant to go and spend my hard-earned money, I'd get shitty service. And the server was rude. The server didn't come back and refill my coffee or soda, either ever or only once. And in some cases, some servers, they'll take your order and then they'll bring you your food. And then if your coffee or soda is empty, they'll ask if you want a refill. They'll refill it. Next thing you know, you'll drink it. Then a half an hour later comes and they haven't come by, and your soda's been empty for 15 minutes or your coffee's been empty for 15 minutes, and they don't come by after that. So they come by, half an hour, 45 minutes later, and then they ask you if you want fucking dessert. And I would say, no, check please. Because at that point I'm pissed off because they haven't checked in on me, in 45 minutes. Now, then there are those servers out there that check in on you every 30 seconds, and that can be pretty fucking annoying. You have to balance it out. I think, checking in on somebody every 10 to 15 minutes is good. But if you go 30 minutes, 45 minutes without checking in on somebody that you're serving, that's shitty service. So, why do I feel that's happening nowadays? Because I feel that people are being raised differently than they used to be raised. I feel people are not being raised with, morals, values, and ethics and traditional values. They're being raised modern world style. I got a Suburban here that's backing up. Okay. Ironically, Suburban is the car that my ex wants to get. Actually, when I first met her almost a couple years ago, you see that white Suburban there? She had a white Suburban like that exactly. She made an impulse buy after her divorce as part of her settlement. She went and bought a nice Suburban, and then she ended up trading it in because the payments were too high. But she's in a better place now. She got her business back up and going, and you know what? If you somehow are watching this, ex-girlfriend, I'm not going to mention your name, you know who you are. I'm sure you're going to be able to afford that Suburban soon, and I'm really happy that you've turned your life around and you've made something out of yourself, and you've grown your business to a level of where you're really doing well, and I'm proud of you. And I can come out here and say, despite what happened between us, I'm proud of you. That Suburban that just pulled in over there just reminded me of that. So that's the reason why I mentioned that on the fly. But yeah, getting back to, people's attitudes nowadays, in the service industry and beyond, it's just unbelievable. It's like no one wants to be friendly anymore. People are so unhappy within themselves that they project their unhappiness onto other people, even in the service industry. And the best example to give is the one I mentioned, the restaurant industry. They're dependent on tips. They give you shitty service, and then they're pissed off that you either give them no tip or you give them a very low, 10% tip instead of 20 or 25 or 30% tip. I'll tell you, I'm a very good tipper when I get excellent service. I'll tip, sometimes I've tipped even 30, 35, 40% for very good service. When I get shit service, I tip 10 to 15% max, typically 10. If I get average service, 15 to 20%, typically 15. Just depends. But I will be honest with you. In today's day and age, especially the last couple of years, whenever I've been to a restaurant, I would say about 70% of the restaurants I've been to in the last 2 to 3 years, I've received shitty service. I'm talking subpar, not even average service. So basically, it's telling me that in today's day and age, people are not raising their kids right. They're not teaching them discipline. They're not teaching them morals, values, and ethics. They're letting their kids do whatever the fuck, they want to do. And that goes back to what I was talking about earlier at the beginning of this video, which is, the first, 3 years of your child's life is very important. It plays a huge role in the ways of how their behavior is going to turn out to be. And that's up to you as the parents to figure out what the right way is to do it. You've got to teach them at a young age. See, I'm learning that now. And it's basically telling me why I ended up being the way I ended up being. I'm not a bad person, but I've had some behavioral issues, even as an adult, that I didn't even realize. That's what happens. But other people around you are going to realize it. My ex realized my behavior. To me, it was normal because it's how I was raised by my family. But to her, it was abnormal. And it's what ended my relationship. So think about it, folks. Think about it. Think about the first 0 to 3 years of your child's life is crucial. And I think that's why, you know, our service industry and people's attitudes in other areas as well, I honestly feel that's why people have shitty attitudes nowadays, because they're not being raised the right way. They don't have, you know, they don't have the traditional values. Traditional values are important. And although we live in a modern world where traditionalism is done, traditional values are still important. It's just different nowadays. It's affecting everything. And I'll be honest with you, I don't know what it's going to take to turn that around. I don't know what it's going to take to turn that around. That's something that I'm not going to speak about right now because I don't have enough information on that. I don't think there's enough information on that out there. But just notice that people's attitudes in general, not just the service industry, but wherever you go, are just down the fucking toilet. People are very unhappy nowadays. And maybe, hang on a second, and maybe it all stems back to traditionalism being dead because of modern day feminism and the women's movement. Not trying to take anything away from the women's movement and the rights and all that. I keep saying that. I am all for girl power and women power, but how has it affected our lives over the last 30, 40 years when the women's movement really kicked into gear? Just think about it. Think about when all these changes started happening. Before that, everything was fine. Now, I'm not saying that it was fair, and that I'm not saying that women were not treated unfairly. In some cases, they were. But even though things were different back then for women, overall, things just worked out much better. Even when women didn't have the rights they have today, overall, everything worked much better. Customer service was better. People were more polite. Nowadays, everybody's rude, men and women. Everyone's rude. Everyone's fucked up. Everyone's crazy. Everyone's selfish. All they do is think about themselves. No one has any compassion. No one has any empathy anymore. So, I don't know what the problem is. I don't know what the solution is to the problem, which is what I'm trying to say. But all I'm going to say is this before I wrap this up. Because this video now is 43 minutes. You as an individual can make a difference. If everyone else around you is fucked up, that doesn't mean you have to be fucked up. It doesn't mean that you need to be rude because someone else is rude to you. I learned this a long time ago, and I'll say it again. Kill them with kindness. Because I used to, react to people that had shitty, service and shitty behavior and shit like that. I used to react to all these things, but now I just kill them with kindness. I just say, hey, you know what? Yeah, this is just, not good service, or this is just not good. Do you mind if I return this? I don't overreact. I kill them with kindness. In certain situations, if a friend of mine is yelling at me, hey man, I'm not mad at you, dude. Don't worry. You don't need to be upset. It's all good. I understand where you're coming from, even if it makes no sense where they're coming from. I just kill them with kindness. If every person out there took the positive approach, even though there's nothing positive about what you're interacting with currently, it would make a huge difference. And that's how I'm going to leave this video here today, is that if you go into every interaction of your life in a positive way, even though you're dealing with negative people and negative things, it'll make a big difference. I'm telling you that. it'll put out an aura into this world that will make a difference. And at the very least, you'll feel better about yourself. You'll feel better that you are one of the few that's not participating in the negativity of the modern world. And maybe one day that will multiply to other people. And maybe way down the road, it'll multiply to everyone in this world will once again be a positive, wonderful place to live in. I'm not saying it's a bad place to live in now, because people still have a lot of fun. It's just different. And because it's different, that's why I'm here to help you navigate it as best as possible based on my experiences. And just keeping it totally real with you folks. So hopefully you didn't think, or hopefully you don't think this video's been fucked up or I've been fucked up. I'm just being raw and real with you folks. You're not going to get anyone else out here on the internet being as raw and real, not only about my own personal life experiences, but talking about, other people's experiences in general and topics in general. Thank you for taking the time to view 2 videos today. I greatly appreciate it. I'm not sure if I'll be back with a video tomorrow. I may do 1 video tomorrow. I definitely won't do 2. I can never do 2 videos in a day back to back. I may do 1 video tomorrow, or I may take the day off, but I am getting my gigabit up and gigabit down fiber internet line into my place tomorrow, so I may also be playing with that for a little bit. I may want to do a video just to see how fast I can upload it. All right, I'm still a little kid at times. I love technology, and whenever I talk about technology and whenever something new comes into my area that I've been waiting for a while, I get excited like this. So, all right. Have yourselves a great night or great day whenever you view this, and I will see you all next time. Talk to you soon. Bye.